Help capture the history of our markets by contributing to the John Lothian News GoFundMe campaign to support the Markets Wiki Education history-focused video series and more.
Advantage Futures is proud to sponsor JLN video series.
Many include a recurring theme of people helping others during critical times in their trading careers.
Too often today, when traders need help the most, their call is met with numbers to press on the phone instead of an actual person.
Advantage prioritizes you.
Personalized service, competitive pricing, aimed at giving you every advantage.
Make us your advantage.
Advantage Futures.
I think, because my dad was a lawyer, I thought that that's probably, what I was going to end up doing. But I knew pretty early that I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't smart enough. I graduated college in 1979 in the middle of a recession, and there were no jobs for, all of us kids getting out of school. I had a, degree in political science. I was, I was a good student, but from a good school, but still, not a lot of jobs. My first interview was at a financial firm, Drexel Lambert, and they offered me a job, so I took it. My first job, like I said, was working for Drexel, and I was there for maybe about 9 months, and I met these guys that we were all in New York, out of their main office in New York, and I met these guys, and they really wanted to trade. They didn't want to work, at a big brokerage firm, but they had families. So they convinced me to move to Chicago and be on the floor. And they would, the game plan was they would run a fund, and I would execute orders and trade for myself. That was we didn't know anything. That was the game plan. So I came to Chicago, got in a seat, and, started doing that. Over a 20-year period, I would guess, as many as 100 people, clerks to prop trading to everything. Okay. We backed a ton of people. Like every other young, stupid guy, I thought I was invincible, but it didn't take its toll on me physically. Mentally and physically, I was pretty strong. I was fine. It takes its. I shouldn't say that. I think you get used to it like any other job, and you stand in a 1 foot spot. I stood in a crowded pit for 20 years, so it wasn't like I had a lot of room to roam, but you kind of get used to it like a caged animal, and you get, it becomes, it's life. That's what you know. This girl I was dating, she moved out here, and then we ended up getting married. So it's when you pick up and leave anything, I had never been west of like the New Yorker cartoon where they show basically, you live in New York, and then there's the East River. And then as soon as you go west of the East River, that's like, the rest of the world. I'd never been west of New York. So I had never been out west. Like I'd never been, to the Midwest. It was a big giant locker room for 20 years of my life. That's where most of my friends, where I made most of my lifelong friends. And I started on the trading floor in the gunslinger era. So it's like, my favorite memories are basically, gunslinging. I was a shooter like everybody else. And I kind of, when I look back at it now, I'm amazed they didn't carry us out of there. Some of my biggest regrets are that I wasted a lot of time, like when it was slow on the trading floor, like I didn't think about all the cool things we could have been building. Like later in life, when we started building Thinkorswim and things like that, and Tasty, I realized how cool it was to build businesses and stuff. And when I was on the trading floor, we wasted a lot of time, playing golf, playing cards, whatever it was. So the time suck is my biggest regret. But it was a really important part of my life. I learned my craft. I learned my domain. I came out to Chicago because these guys offered me this, they said, if you move to Chicago, we'll put up the money. And I remember at the time it was 50 grand. And to me, 50 grand seemed like 100 million back when I was 21 years old. And so I flew out to Chicago for one day just to see, like, try to find a place to live and just to make sure. And I went to the trading floor. And the minute I walked on the trading floor, this was the old trading floor in the Board of Trade on like the 7th floor. It was the old CBOE before they built the CBOE building. And I walked on the trading floor, and I remember there was this guy named Andy, and he showed me around, and because he was a friend of a friend. And I just walked around with like eyes wide open, mouth totally wide open. And I was like, oh my God, this is where I got to be. The noise, the level of like energy, the excitement. I was like, this is the greatest place in the world. Cause I like to gamble and I liked action. And this was like, I knew it the second the doors opened, I walked inside, I knew I needed to be there. Coming to the floor in Chicago, initially I decided, well, I'll take a draw of like, let's say $2,500 a month, but no guarantees. And so it was a risky trade for me, but I thought the 50 grand would last us a long time. The guys blew out in the first month. I made $6.25. I made one teeny, and it was my first trade. And then after I made my first trade, because it took me a couple of days to figure out what everybody's yelling and screaming about. So I was up $6.25, and the guys that sent me out lost all 50 grand. They took a giant shot, they lost it. And so they didn't have any more money. So I was in Chicago with $2,000 in my bank account and no job. And that was 1 month after I got here. Some guy gave me a job clerking and spreading for him. And then I met this other guy because I turned out to be an okay spreader, and it took me a couple of months to learn how to make money. And then I found another who lent me 100 grand on like a 70-30 split. And I was just successful. And a couple of, 2 years later, I bought him out. And, 3 years later, I was making $1 million a year or more than that, who knows? Well, I never had $1 million day. So, let's say in the $500,000 range, just was in the right place at the right time type of thing, crazy markets, right place, right time. Well, on the trading floor, your trading style changes with the changes in the business. So, as the business as the edge narrowed, you change your trading style a little bit, but primarily it wasn't that dramatically different. We had to, towards the end, we were carrying more positions, things like that, because the edge was smaller. But, truthfully, my trading style didn't change that dramatically. I learned by being thrown into the fire. I literally learned on the trading floor as a market maker. I had traded options as an employee at Drexel. I made a few hundred trades, but they were all customer trades. I didn't really learn the business until I got to the trading floor. My worst trading era was just, remember, I traded in a very active pit. So it was, I traded in the S&P 100, the OEX, and there were 400 guys in there. So there were a lot of, out trades, hand signals. You're basically doing everything by hand signaling and blah, 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 this and that. The bottom line for, worst era was probably just an ugly out trade. Like, I think I'm selling, I think I'm buying calls. Somebody else thinks they're, selling me puts, that kind of thing. I don't remember specifically, a specific incident, but there was literally hundreds of them. Brutal, because back then they didn't have they had a, there was no such thing as like a one price opening. Like they openings took forever. So it was a tough situation because the opening rotation, I don't know if you remember the opening rotation, but it used to be brutal, and it was just a very, complex, slow process. And it, after the crash, it took a whole day to open all the options. It was one of my least favorite parts of the day, the opening rotation. You just become friends. They're still to this day my friends. So, the brokers and the market makers have, basically there's a certain friendship, and at first there's like it's business, and then later on it becomes, you're all friends. You can be a prick and you can be a jerk, or you can just say, like I wasn't one of those guys that tried to intimidate people that came into the pit, or I knew how hard the business was. And I didn't appreciate it when people did that to, young traders or anything like that. So I was pretty nice, and we were, friendly. I mean, we were all reasonable. Most people were pretty reasonable. There were definitely people helping other people out when they got into trouble. There's no question about that. I mean, most people, even the worst of the alpha males and everything else, most people were pretty reasonable with other people when when push came to shove and somebody really fell on hard times. I think more than anything else, life lessons would be, hard work and lots of really quick decision making is my biggest takeaway. Obviously you pick up domain skill, but I think for me, the ability to make decisions and also kind of believe in myself, gave me some good tools for later on in life.
Advantage Futures is proud to sponsor this JLN video series. In many of the series videos, there are recurring themes of people being helped at critical times in their trading careers. Too often today, when traders need help the most, their call is met with numbers to press on the phone instead of an actual person. At Advantage, you are our priority. Everyone needs an edge or advantage when trading. Make us your advantage.
John Lothian News would like to thank those individuals who have contributed to our Markets Wiki Education GoFundMe campaign. Their financial assistance allows us to produce and distribute videos like this for our Open Outcry Traders History Project or the Path to Electronic Trading video series. Join them in supporting John Lothian News, capturing the history of our industry.